So that's my belief on homosexuality. And then there's another question on women. Are there more expectations, higher standards on uh, women than there are men? I'm kind of uncomfortable discussing that in one sense because obviously I'm a man and my views might be filtered through that lens. I would like to think that they're not. I have three beautiful daughters, a loving mother, a very successful sister, and the woman who will someday be my wife soon. Very, progressive woman. I'm all about women succeeding. I think my life has reflected that. So I want to lay that as a context in answering the question. Um, I believe that standards for men and women in some respects are unequal, but it goes both ways. Men and women have standards that are unequal to each other, and broader society might consider that unfair in some respects. Some of those things, and the issue is so broad, you have to get into so many subcategories of issues here. But in all, I don't believe that there are, on balance, I don't believe the standards are any greater for women than they are men. And in fact, some might argue from an Afrocentric perspective that for us to engage in that kind of dialogue actually dilutes our strength. Because, for instance, if you look at the Civil Rights Act, while it may have been well intended, Dr. King made concessions that would include women as minorities, and who's been the biggest benefactor or beneficiary of those policies has been Europeans, and specifically Caucasian women. So when we engage in a men versus female debate or discussion, I think we are reflecting a view, or we're debating an issue that dilutes our strength in society versus unites it and brings it to a better place. I don't believe the standards are different, and to the extent that there are different standards, I believe it's largely about race. Let me just give one data point. From a corporate perspective, as you all well aware, um, because the Civil Rights Act had the threefold test of, three characteristics of defining protected classes, that is, characteristics that were immutable, characteristics that were identifiable, and characteristics that were associated with historic socioeconomic oppression and discrimination. Women fit two of those categories: their gender and their race. Black men fit one, race. And so when we talk about the higher standards, in some respects, because of the scoring of how, typically we looked at contracts and employment and so on, in that respect, black women were actually in a better place than black men because of the scoring, how these policies evolved. Now, it didn't evolve for the benefit of black women, it evolved for the benefit of white women, and black women were able to leverage that. So the standards that we talk about, it's a very complicated issue because in some respects it's one way, in some respects it's the other way. If you look at the faith community, are the standards different? I don't believe we hold women to a higher standard of godliness than we do men. I don't see that. If you look at politics, I certainly don't see it there either. I mean, there have been interesting figures down through politics throughout the history of time. Even more recently, you look at Golda Meir. Golda Meir was very much a militaristic kind of person, and she was going through her career early on to it when Israel, state of Israel, came to existence, but she was very much she was pro, let's go to war. Did we hold her to higher standards? Say, no, you should be a person of peace because you're a woman? Not really. We see that happen in politics all the time. And so I don't see where the standards are that different. In the case of family, I think there's a lot of myths around women in the context of family and men. But there are problems on both sides. And so we can't engage in a conversation around standards without one being very specific about what issues we're talking about, and two, if we look at the vast landscape of what we call society, whether it's faith, economics, politics, health, community, and so on, you're probably going to see what might seem unequal things on both sides regarding both of the genders. So I don't really have a definite way of saying that there's a higher standard. In fact, I would suggest there isn't. And I think that we need to embrace more our Afrocentrism than our gender issues, because that's, again, the kind of discussion only separates us as a people and not brings us together. So we need to be about bringing ourselves together, because we do have one common thing, that we know there are some standards that are just not right in society, and that is that we are African Americans. We're people of African descent, and the shared things that we experience are because of that. And that's something that unites us. That conversation unites us. When our communities are in need, it's not a certain standard in communities for women or men. We have certain issues that affect us as people of African descent. And that's where the conversation needs to be. So I hope I answered the questions. I apologize for the length of my answers. I hope you can edit these things out where it's not needed. But anyway, I appreciate it, and thank you, Lauren, for allowing me to participate. I love you, and best wishes to you and the good people at Ohio University. Take care.